Christmas is family only this year, Margaret. I hope you understand that we need some space to create our own traditions without outside influences. Ashley's voice carried across my son's dining room like a perfectly aimed arrow, designed to wound while maintaining plausible deniability about the intent. The Thanksgiving table fell silent. My son David, his two children, Emma, 8, and Lucas, 6, David's brother Michael and his wife Sarah, even Ashley's own parents who'd driven 3 hours to join us for the holiday. Sometimes the cruelest announcements are made during family gatherings because witnesses make the rejection feel more official. I'm Margaret, 62 years old, a retired ICU nurse who spent 35 years taking care of other people's families and thought I'd finally get to focus on enjoying my own. After losing my husband Robert 2 years ago, Christmas with my son's family had become the anchor of my year. The reason I bought gifts in July and planned special cookies and activities that would make the grandchildren smile. Ashley, what do you mean by family only? Michael asked, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone who suspected he was about to witness something uncomfortable. I mean David, myself, and our children. We want Christmas morning to be intimate this year. Just us. Clean photos, meaningful moments, no complications. When someone uses words like clean and complications to describe family members, they're usually talking about image management rather than emotional authenticity. Ashley was 31, perfectly put together in the way that required daily effort and significant financial investment, and obsessed with creating the kind of social media presence that made other women feel inadequate about their own lives. Her Instagram account featured artfully arranged family moments that looked more like magazine shoots than actual life, professionally decorated home, designer clothing, children who always appeared clean and cooperative. Mom has never been a complication, David said quietly, though his voice lacked the conviction I'd hoped to hear from my son when his wife was excluding his mother from Christmas. Of course not. Ashley's smile could have powered the holiday lights. Margaret is wonderful, but Christmas is about nuclear family bonding, and this year we really want to focus on what that means for Emma and Lucas. Using child welfare to justify adult social preferences is a tactic that makes disagreement sound selfish regardless of the actual impact on children. I looked at Emma and Lucas, who were staring at their plates with the particular discomfort children show when adults are having conversations that affect them but that they're not allowed to participate in. What do you think, Emma? Would you like Grandma Margaret to spend Christmas with us? I asked directly, because children's preferences often get lost when adults make decisions for their benefit. Yes, Emma's response was immediate and emphatic. You always make the best Christmas cookie, and you know how to play the piano so we can sing Christmas songs. Me too, Lucas chimed in. And you let us help wrap presents, and you don't get mad when we mess up the paper. Children often have clearer priorities about holiday activities than adults who are focused on appearance and control rather than actual enjoyment. Ashley's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in her carefully maintained pleasant expression. Emma, sweetheart, this year we want Christmas to be just our immediate family. You'll have other times to see Grandma Margaret. But Christmas is the best time, Emma said with the devastating honesty of someone who hadn't yet learned to protect adults from truth they didn't want to hear. Emma, that's enough, David said, demonstrating the conflict avoidance that had apparently led him to agree with Ashley's exclusion plan, rather than defending his mother's place in their family celebration. When parents shut down children's honest expressions of preference, they're often protecting adult decisions that wouldn't survive scrutiny from the people supposedly being served. Margaret, I hope you understand this isn't personal, Ashley continued, her voice carrying the practiced sweetness of someone delivering bad news while expecting gratitude for the manner of delivery. It's just that Christmas has become so chaotic in recent years. We want something more peaceful. Chaotic. That was how Ashley described the holidays where I brought homemade cookies and taught her children to make paper snowflakes, where I helped with cooking so she could relax and enjoy time with her family, where I made sure everyone had thoughtful gifts, and that no one felt forgotten during the morning present exchange. When someone describes joy and inclusion as chaos, they're usually prioritizing control over connection. I understand, I said, though understanding and accepting were different things. You want Christmas to be exactly the way you envision it. Exactly. I knew you'd get it. You're so reasonable about these things. Ashley seemed genuinely relieved, as if she'd been worried I might argue or make the conversation difficult, instead of graciously accepting exclusion from my son's family Christmas. People often mistake politeness for agreement, especially when the alternative would require acknowledging that their requests are unreasonable. So, what will you do for Christmas, Mom? David asked, perhaps realizing for the first time that excluding me from their celebration meant I'd be spending the holiday alone. I'll figure something out, I said, reaching into my purse for the small notebook where I kept important phone numbers. Actually, I might do something completely different this year. Like what? Sarah asked, demonstrating more interest in my holiday plans than my son seemed to be showing. Well, I've been thinking about taking a vacation. Maybe somewhere warm. Maybe somewhere that doesn't require managing other people's expectations about what Christmas should look like. Sometimes the best response to exclusion is not to beg for inclusion, but to create better alternatives. Ashley's smile flickered slightly, as if she was processing implications she hadn't considered when she made her announcement. A vacation sounds lovely, she said, though her voice carried less confidence than it had a few minutes earlier. So why did Ashley's sudden uncertainty feel like the moment when someone realizes that excluding people from your plans doesn't automatically make your own plans more meaningful? People often assume that retired nurses become helpless or financially dependent after leaving their careers, but 35 years in intensive care teaches you planning skills, financial discipline, and the ability to make decisions quickly when circumstances change unexpectedly. When you've spent decades making life and death decisions under pressure, planning a holiday vacation feels like remarkably manageable logistics. I'd been contributing to my pension fund since I was 22 years old, lived modestly throughout my career, and inherited Robert's life insurance and retirement savings when he passed 2 years ago. Ashley seemed to assume I was financially dependent on David's family for social activities and holiday inclusion, but independence had been my priority long before I became a widow. Financial security creates emotional freedom, especially when family dynamics become complicated by people who confuse money with power. After Robert died, I'd made several decisions about how to spend my remaining years. I wanted to travel to places we'd always planned to visit together. I wanted to support my grandchildren's activities and education. I wanted to be helpful to David's family without becoming burdensome or intrusive. Apparently, I'd miscalculated what Ashley considered helpful versus intrusive. Good intentions don't protect you from other people's interpretations of your behavior, especially when those interpretations serve their need for control. For the past 2 years, I'd been quietly contributing to Emma's piano lessons and Lucas's soccer league fees, not because David couldn't afford them, but because grandchildren should have opportunities to explore interests that might not fit into their parents' immediate budget priorities. I'd been helping with Ashley's expensive home renovation project, the kitchen remodel that cost more than I'd spent on housing in any single year of my life, the landscaping project that transformed their backyard into something that belonged in a magazine. Financial support given quietly often goes unacknowledged until it's withdrawn, at which point people discover how much they'd been taking for granted. Ashley had never explicitly asked for help with these expenses, but she'd mentioned them frequently: how expensive piano lessons were getting, how much the soccer league cost with equipment and travel fees, how challenging it was to afford the kind of renovations that would create the perfect family environment she wanted for the children. I'd started offering to cover these costs because I enjoyed being able to contribute to my family's happiness, and because I had resources that weren't being used for anything more important than making people I loved more comfortable. Generosity that isn't acknowledged or appreciated often becomes generosity that gets reevaluated when circumstances change. Now, sitting in my own living room the morning after Thanksgiving, surrounded by Christmas decorations I'd already put up in anticipation of hosting holiday activities that were apparently no longer welcome, I was reconsidering my financial priorities. When someone excludes you from family celebration, they're also excluding themselves from your generosity, whether they realize it or not. I pulled out my laptop and began researching Christmas cruise options. If I was going to spend the holidays alone, I might as well spend them somewhere beautiful, with people who'd chosen to celebrate joy rather than control family interactions through exclusion. Travel during holidays often costs more than travel during other times of year, but it also provides experiences that can't be replicated by staying home, feeling sorry for yourself. The cruise options were extensive and appealing. 7 days in the Caribbean with Christmas Day at sea, New Year's Eve in the Bahamas, dining and entertainment that didn't require managing anyone else's expectations about appropriate behavior or conversation topic, freedom to choose your own holiday experience without needing approval from people who've decided you're not suitable for their plans, feels remarkably liberating. I found a balcony stateroom on a ship that departed December 23rd and returned December 30th. Perfect timing to avoid Ashley's family-only Christmas while creating my own holiday experience that would actually focus on enjoyment rather than social media photography. The cost was significant but manageable, especially when I calculated what I'd been spending annually on Ashley's home improvement and the children's extracurricular activities. If I was going to be excluded from family celebration, I could redirect those financial contributions toward my own happiness. Money spent on people who don't appreciate your presence often gets better results when spent on experiences that welcome your participation. I booked the cruise, upgraded to a beverage package, and scheduled shore excursions that looked interesting rather than educational or culturally improving. If Ashley wanted me to spend Christmas alone, I'd spend it alone in style, with professional entertainment and food prepared by someone other than myself. Spite isn't always the best motivation, but it can fund remarkably good decision-making when someone has excluded you from alternatives that would have been less expensive and less fun. The confirmation email included information about dress codes, dining options, and holiday activities planned for Christmas Day. The ship would have special Christmas brunch, holiday entertainment, and organized activities for people celebrating away from home. I wouldn't be the only person spending Christmas on a cruise ship, which meant I wouldn't be the only person whose family situation had led them to seek alternative holiday plans. Sometimes the best response to rejection is discovering that other people have made similar choices for similar reasons, creating community among people who've chosen independence over accommodation. I printed my boarding passes and cruise document, then photographed them for my own social media account. If Ashley wanted to create perfect family Christmas posts for Instagram, she could do that. I would create posts about adult independence and holiday joy that didn't require managing other people's moods or expectations. Competition through social media usually benefits the person who's actually enjoying their experience rather than the person who's performing happiness for public consumption. I started a group chat with my former ICU colleagues, several of whom were also navigating holiday complexities with adult children who had strong opinions about family gatherings. "Anyone want to see pictures of my Christmas cruise while you're dealing with family drama?" I wrote. "I'll be posting updates from the Caribbean while you're managing dinner table politics." So why did planning my own perfect holiday feel like the most rebellious and satisfying decision I'd made since retiring from nursing? "Mom, Ashley told me you're taking a cruise for Christmas?" David's voice carried the particular confusion of someone who'd expected his excluded parent to spend the holidays quietly at home, not creating alternative plans that might look more appealing than his own family celebration. 3 days after Thanksgiving, David had called with what seemed like genuine surprise that I'd made independent holiday arrangements rather than accepting exclusion gracefully and invisibly. When people exclude you from their plans, they often expect you to remain available as backup in case their original plans don't work out as expected. Yes, I'm leaving December 23rd, 7 days in the Caribbean, Christmas Day at sea, New Year's Eve in Nassau. But what if we wanted to include you in something over the holidays? The question revealed more about David's assumptions than about any actual plans Ashley might have reconsidered. People often realize they want to include you after they've made arrangements that exclude you, especially when your alternatives look better than their original plans. David, Ashley was very clear that Christmas is family only this year. I'm respecting that by making my own family-only plan, me being my own family. She didn't mean you couldn't be part of any holiday activities, just that Christmas morning would be smaller this year. When someone realizes their exclusion was more comprehensive than they intended to admit, they often revise the boundaries retroactively to sound less harsh. What other holiday activities? Ashley didn't mention any other opportunities for inclusion when she announced her family-only Christmas policy. David was quiet for long enough that I could hear Ashley in the background, her voice sharp with the particular tone women use when they're trying to control conversations they're not directly participating. "Well, maybe we could have you over for Christmas afternoon, or the day after Christmas, or sometime during Christmas week." That's thoughtful, but I'll be on a cruise ship. The booking is confirmed, paid for, and non-refundable. When someone offers accommodation after you've made alternative arrangements, the accommodation often sounds less generous than it would have before you realized you had better options. Mom, you don't have to take a cruise just because Ashley wanted a smaller Christmas morning. We could work something out. David, I'm not taking a cruise just because of anything. I'm taking a cruise because it sounds like exactly the kind of Christmas I want to have this year. No stress, no politics, no managing other people's expectations about appropriate holiday behavior. Freedom chosen enthusiastically often sounds different from freedom accepted reluctantly, even when the external circumstances are similar. But what about Emma and Lucas? They'll miss you during the holidays. They'll miss me Christmas morning, which is when Ashley specifically requested that I not be present. They can miss me from somewhere beautiful while I'm having experiences I can tell them about later. Children often adapt to adult decisions more easily than adults adapt to the consequences of their own choices. Ashley feels bad that you think she was trying to exclude you completely. Ashley excluded me from Christmas. That's not interpretation. That's what she said. In front of witnesses. At Thanksgiving dinner. But she didn't mean it to sound so final. When someone's words create consequences they didn't anticipate, they often claim their meaning was different from their actual statement. David, what exactly did Ashley mean? Because what she said was, Christmas is family only. You're not welcome. If she meant something different, she should have said something different. Another pause. More background conversation. Ashley's voice rising with what sounded like instructions about how this conversation should proceed. She meant that Christmas morning should be just immediate family, but that didn't mean excluding you from all Christmas activity. Which Christmas activities was I included in? Specifically? When someone claims they meant to include you, asking for specifics often reveals that the inclusion was theoretical rather than planned. Well, we hadn't worked out all the details yet. David, it's December 1st. Christmas is in 24 days. If you haven't worked out details for including me in holiday activity, it's because you weren't actually planning to include me in holiday activity. That's not fair, Mom. What's not fair is excluding someone from family Christmas and then being upset when they make alternative plans that don't involve waiting around, hoping for last-minute invitation. Fairness often becomes a concern for people who realize their decisions have created consequences that affect them more than they expected. I could hear Ashley in the background, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone who was discovering that excluding people from plans sometimes led to those people making better plans independently. Mom, Ashley wants to talk to you. I'm happy to talk to Ashley. Put her on the phone. Margaret, I think there's been a misunderstanding about Christmas plans. Ashley's voice carried the bright, artificial sweetness she used when she needed to manage situations that weren't developing according to her preferences. What kind of misunderstanding? I never meant to exclude you from all holiday activity, just that Christmas morning should be intimate family time. People often revise their original statements when those statements create results they didn't intend, especially when the results make them look less generous than they want to appear. Ashley, you said Christmas is family only. You're not welcome. Which part of that was supposed to include me in other holiday activities? I meant Christmas morning specifically, not the entire holiday season. Which other holiday activities were you planning to include me in? The question hung in the air long enough for me to understand that there had been no other planned activities, just the assumption that I would remain available for undefined future possibilities that might or might not materialize based on Ashley's convenience. When someone claims they plan to include you but can't specify how or when, they usually planned to keep you as an option rather than as a priority. Well, we hadn't finalized all our holiday plans yet. It's December 1st, Ashley. Most people have finalized their holiday plans by now, especially if those plans involve coordinating with family members. Margaret, you don't have to take a cruise just because of one conversation about Christmas morning arrangement. I'm not taking a cruise just because of anything. I'm taking a cruise because it sounds like the most enjoyable way to spend Christmas this year. When someone realizes that their exclusion has led to better alternatives, they often frame the alternatives as reactions rather than choices. But what if the children want to see you during Christmas week? They can want to see me. That's different from you planning activities that include me. Wanting to see someone and planning to include someone are different things. So why did Ashley's sudden concern about including me feel less like genuine invitation and more like concern that my alternatives might look better than her original plans? Margaret, can we talk honestly about this situation? Ashley's voice had lost its artificial brightness and taken on the tone of someone who was beginning to realize that a conversation wasn't going according to her script. I thought we were already talking honestly. You told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas. I made alternative plans. What part needs more honesty? When someone asks to talk honestly after previous conversation, they are usually about to reveal information they were withholding earlier. I didn't expect you to react this way to Christmas morning being family only. How did you expect me to react? I thought you'd understand that we needed some space, and maybe we could figure out other times to get together during the holidays. People often expect their exclusions to be accepted gracefully while maintaining the option to include you later if convenient. Ashley, what other times? You've had 3 days since Thanksgiving to suggest alternative holiday activities. What specific plans were you thinking about? The silence stretched long enough for me to understand that Ashley had been operating on assumptions rather than actual plans. Assumptions that I would accept exclusion quietly and remain available for theoretical future invitations that existed more as possibilities than as genuine intention. When someone excludes you but expects you to remain accessible, they're treating you as a backup option rather than as a priority. Well, there's Christmas Eve, or the day after Christmas, or maybe New Year's? Maybe? Ashley, it's December 1st. Are you planning activities for those days? Or are you just naming dates when you might want company if your original plans don't work out? Margaret, why are you being so difficult about this? I was trying to create a peaceful Christmas morning, and now you're acting like I've committed some terrible offense. When someone frames their exclusion as creating peace and your response as being difficult, they're trying to make their preferences sound reasonable and your boundaries sound selfish. I'm not being difficult. I'm being independent. You said Christmas was family only, so I'm spending Christmas with my family, me. But taking a cruise seems so extreme. What's extreme about spending Christmas somewhere beautiful with people who welcome holiday celebration rather than somewhere I've been told I'm not wanted? When someone's independence looks more appealing than their inclusion, the original exclusion often starts to seem like poor planning rather than good boundary. I could hear David in the background, his voice carrying the strain of someone who was beginning to realize that family situations sometimes create consequences that extend beyond the immediate decision. Ashley, maybe we should just let Mom enjoy her cruise and figure out holiday plans for next year. David, your mother is spending Christmas on a ship with strangers instead of with her family. That's not normal. When someone describes your choices as not normal, they're usually concerned that your alternatives make their options look less desirable. Ashley, my family uninvited me from Christmas. Spending the holiday with people who want to celebrate sounds more normal than spending it alone, because my family decided I wasn't suitable for their celebration. We didn't uninvite you. We just wanted Christmas morning to be smaller this year. Smaller by excluding me. That's what uninviting means. Semantic arguments about exclusion often reveal that people understand the impact of their action but don't want to be responsible for that impact. Margaret, what if I said you could come for Christmas morning? Would you cancel the cruise? The offer hung in the air like a test, and I realized that Ashley was discovering something about power dynamics that she hadn't anticipated when she made her original announcement. When someone offers to include you after you've made better alternative plans, the inclusion often sounds less like generosity and more like damage control. Ashley, are you inviting me because you want me there? Or because you don't want me posting pictures from a Caribbean cruise while you're having family Christmas? The silence was answer enough. Ashley was realizing that excluding me from Christmas hadn't made her Christmas better. It had just made my alternative Christmas look more appealing. Social media dynamics often complicate family exclusion because independence can look more attractive than inclusion when it's documented publicly. I want you to be part of our family celebration. Then why did you exclude me from family celebration? I wanted Christmas morning to be just immediate family, and I respected that by making plans that don't involve your immediate family. I don't understand why that's a problem. When someone's exclusion leads to consequences they didn't expect, they often try to renegotiate the terms after the alternative arrangements have been made. Margaret, please, can't you understand that I was trying to create something special for David and the children? I do understand that. And I'm creating something special for myself since I wasn't invited to be part of what you were creating for your immediate family. But taking a cruise seems so lonely. When someone describes your independence as loneliness, they're often projecting their own fears about not being needed onto your choices. Ashley, being alone somewhere beautiful with activities and entertainment is different from being alone at knowing your family chose to exclude you. One feels like adventure, the other feels like rejection. We're not rejecting you. What would you call excluding someone from Christmas? We're just trying to create our own traditions, and I'm creating mine. Mine just happen to include professional entertainment, Caribbean beaches, and people who are excited about holiday celebration rather than stressed about managing family dynamic. When you describe your alternatives enthusiastically, people often realize their original plans sound less appealing than they intended. David's voice came through the phone, sounding tired. Mom, what would it take for you to change your mind about the cruise? David, what would it take for you to change your mind about excluding me from Christmas? We're not excluding you from Christmas. You're excluding me from Christmas morning, Christmas activities, Christmas celebration, and Christmas family time. What part of Christmas am I included in? When someone claims they're not excluding you while listing all the things you're excluded from, they're usually trying to avoid responsibility for the scope of their exclusion. You could come for Christmas dinner or Christmas afternoon or sometime during Christmas week. Could I? Or are you just naming possibilities that might happen if your original plans don't work out the way you expect? The question hung unanswered, which was answer enough. When theoretical inclusion meets actual planning, the difference between genuine invitation and backup options becomes obvious. Margaret, please don't spend Christmas alone on a cruise ship. Ashley, I won't be alone. I'll be with people who are choosing to celebrate holidays together. That's different from being alone. So why did Ashley's sudden concern about my holiday plans feel less like family care and more like concern that my alternatives were starting to look better than her original vision? Mom, there's something I need to tell you. David's call came on December 10th, 2 weeks after Ashley's attempt to renegotiate Christmas arrangements that I'd politely declined in favor of keeping my cruise reservation. What's wrong? You sound worried. Ashley's been calculating our holiday expenses, and she realized how much you've been contributing to things throughout the year. Financial reality often becomes apparent when people start planning celebrations without considering who's been quietly funding parts of their lifestyle. What kind of things? Emma's piano lesson, Lucas's soccer fees, the kitchen renovation, the new landscaping. Ashley didn't realize that money was coming from you instead of from our regular budget. Generosity that's given quietly often goes unnoticed until it's withdrawn, at which point people discover how much they'd been taking for granted. I never made those contributions conditional on Christmas invitations, David. I helped with those expenses because I wanted to, not because I expected specific treatment in return. But now that you're spending that money on a cruise instead, now that I'm not spending that money on your family's expenses, when someone's alternative plans require redirecting financial resources, the people who were benefiting from those resources often discover their value retroactively. Mom, Ashley wants to know if you'd consider if maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement where you could be included in Christmas and also continue helping with the kids' activities. The request revealed everything about how Ashley had been thinking about my financial contribution, not as gifts from a grandmother who wanted to support her family, but as payments for services that could be negotiated based on her comfort level with my participation. When someone tries to negotiate your inclusion in family activities based on your financial contributions, they're treating relationships like business transactions. David, are you asking me to pay for Christmas invitation through continued financial support for your household expenses? That's not how Ashley meant it. How did Ashley mean it? The pause was long enough for me to understand that David was processing implications about his wife's motivation that he might not have considered before this conversation. When someone realizes that their spouse views family relationships as financial arrangement, the revelation often creates uncomfortable questions about values and priorities. She's worried about how we'll manage the piano lessons and soccer fees without your help. And she's realized that excluding me from Christmas also excluded her from my financial assistance. She didn't think about it that way when she made the Christmas announcement. People often make decisions based on emotional preferences without considering practical consequences, especially when the practical consequences affect their financial stability. David, what exactly is Ashley proposing? That I pay for piano lessons and soccer fees in exchange for Christmas morning inclusion? She's proposing that we figure out a way for everyone to be happy with holiday arrangements. Everyone, meaning Ashley, gets the Christmas celebration she wants and also gets continued financial support for expenses she can't afford on her own. When someone's happiness requires both excluding you from events and including your financial contributions, they're treating you as a funding source rather than as a family member. Mom, that's not fair to Ashley. What's not fair is asking someone to fund your lifestyle while excluding them from your family celebration. You don't have to fund anything. Ashley just wants to understand what changed about your willingness to help with the kids' activities. When someone frames withdrawal of financial support as a change in willingness rather than a consequence of exclusion, they're trying to avoid responsibility for the connection between their decisions and your responses. What changed is that I'm spending my discretionary income on a Caribbean cruise instead of on piano lessons for children whose mother doesn't want me at their Christmas celebration. The piano lessons are for Emma, not for Ashley, and Emma will miss me at Christmas, which Ashley decided was less important than her desire for family-only celebration. When someone tries to separate children's needs from adult decisions about family inclusion, they're usually avoiding responsibility for how their choices affect everyone involved. Emma doesn't understand why you're taking a cruise instead of spending Christmas with us. Did you explain to Emma that her mother uninvited me from Christmas? We explained that Christmas plans had changed this year. That's not the same as explaining that Ashley specifically requested that I not attend Christmas celebration. When someone edits the explanation of events to avoid acknowledging their role in creating the situation, they're usually protecting their image rather than providing honest information. Mom, what do you want us to tell the children about why you're not here for Christmas? Tell them the truth. Their mother wanted Christmas to be family only, so Grandma Margaret is having her own family-only Christmas on a cruise ship. That makes Ashley sound bad. Ashley's decisions make Ashley sound however Ashley sounds. I'm not responsible for managing her image with her own children. When someone asks you to protect their reputation from the consequences of their own choices, they're asking you to take responsibility for their decision. Margaret, can I talk to you? Ashley's voice came through the phone with the careful tone of someone who'd been listening to the entire conversation and had decided to participate directly. Of course, I've been thinking about Christmas arrangements, and I wonder if we made the right decision about family-only celebration. When someone revisits their decisions because those decisions created financial consequences, the reconsideration often has more to do with practical concerns than with emotional recognition. What kind of thinking have you been doing? I realize that excluding you from Christmas might have seemed more final than I intended. Ashley, how was Christmas is family only? You're not welcome. Supposed to seem temporary or partial. I meant that Christmas morning should be immediate family, but I didn't think through how that would affect other holiday activities or your relationship with Emma and Lucas. When someone claims they didn't think through the consequences of their decision, they're usually admitting that they prioritized their preferences without considering impact on other people. What other holiday activities were you planning that would include me? Well, we hadn't planned specific activities yet, but we could have worked something out. Ashley, it's December 10th. If you were planning to include me in holiday activity, you would have planned specific activities by now. Margaret, please, I made a mistake. Can't we figure out some way to include you in Christmas? When someone admits they made a mistake after discovering that the mistake created financial consequences for them, the admission often sounds more strategic than sincere. What kind of inclusion are you thinking about? You could come for Christmas morning, the whole day, whatever you want. In exchange for continued financial support for piano lessons and soccer fees? It's not an exchange. It's just that we were counting on your help with the children's activities. When someone claims their requests aren't exchanges while asking for both inclusion and continued financial contribution, they're trying to avoid acknowledging the transactional nature of their proposal. Ashley, were you counting on my financial help when you excluded me from Christmas? The silence was answer enough. So why did Ashley's recognition that she needed my money more than she needed control over Christmas morning feel less like family reconciliation and more like business negotiation? Margaret, I think we need to have an honest conversation about family expectations and financial arrangement. Ashley's voice had shifted into what I recognized as her crisis management tone, the one she used when social situations weren't developing according to her preferences and required direct intervention. I thought we were already having an honest conversation. You excluded me from Christmas, I made alternative plans, and now you're concerned about how those plans affect your budget. When someone frames their financial concerns as family expectations, they're usually trying to make their practical needs sound more emotionally meaningful. It's not about the budget, it's about the children's activities and maintaining consistency in their lives. Ashley, the children's activities were consistent when you were planning to exclude me from Christmas. What changed? Nothing changed about the activities, but we realized how much we depend on your support for things that matter to Emma and Lucas. When someone realizes they depend on support from people they've excluded, the dependency often becomes more visible than the exclusion. You depend on my financial support for activities while excluding me from family celebration. Do you understand how that arrangement sounds? It sounds like family helping family. It sounds like using family. Family helping family would involve including me in celebrations that matter to Emma and Lucas, not just including my money in budgets that make your life more comfortable. The difference between family cooperation and family exploitation often becomes clear when someone wants your resource but not your present. David had joined the phone call, and I could hear him trying to find diplomatic language for a situation that had moved beyond diplomatic. Mom, maybe we can find some compromise that works for everyone. What kind of compromise, David? I spend Christmas alone while funding activities for children whose mother doesn't want me at their celebration? Or Ashley includes me in Christmas while expecting continued financial support as payment for that inclusion. When compromise means one person sacrifices both social inclusion and financial resources, while the other person maintains both social control and financial benefit, it's not actually compromise. We want you to be part of Christmas, and we want the kids to continue their activities. Those don't have to be connected. They became connected when Ashley excluded me from Christmas while expecting continued financial contributions to your household budget. I never said the financial support was connected to Christmas invitation. Ashley's voice rose with the particular defensiveness of someone who was being confronted with implications they hadn't intended to make explicit. When someone becomes defensive about connections they didn't explicitly make but clearly assumed, they're usually uncomfortable with having their motivations examined directly. You didn't have to say it explicitly, Ashley. You excluded me from Christmas in November and called to renegotiate Christmas inclusion in December after realizing I wouldn't be available to pay for piano lessons while being excluded from family celebration. That's not what happened. What happened, according to you? I made a mistake about Christmas planning, and separately, we realized how much your financial support means to our family. When someone claims that timing is coincidental rather than causal, they're usually trying to avoid acknowledging that their decisions created consequences they didn't anticipate. Ashley, did you realize how much my financial support meant to your family before or after you excluded me from Christmas? Before, obviously, but that didn't factor into Christmas planning. If you realized my financial support was important to your family before Christmas planning, why did you exclude the person providing that support from your family's celebration? The question hung in the air long enough for everyone to process the logical implications Ashley had been trying to avoid. When someone's decisions don't align with their stated priorities, asking direct questions often reveals motivations they hadn't examined. Margaret, Christmas morning arrangements and financial support for the children are separate issues. Then handle them separately. Make Christmas arrangements that reflect your actual priorities and make financial arrangements that reflect your actual needs. What do you mean? If you want Christmas to be family only without me, have family only Christmas without me. If you need financial support for piano lessons and soccer fees, ask for financial support for piano lessons and soccer fees. When someone tries to package exclusion with financial dependence, unbundling those issues often clarifies what they actually want versus what they're willing to admit they want. But we want you to be part of Christmas. Since when? Since we realized that excluding you wasn't what we actually wanted. What did you actually want, Ashley? When someone admits that their original decision wasn't what they actually wanted, they're usually discovering motivations they hadn't examined before experiencing consequences. I wanted Christmas morning to feel peaceful and intimate, and you thought excluding me would create peace and intimacy? I thought smaller numbers would feel less chaotic. Ashley, I'm one person who bakes cookies and plays piano while children sing Christmas songs. What part of that creates chaos? When someone describes normal family activities as chaotic, they're usually more concerned about control than about actual disruption. It's not that you create chaos, It's that managing everyone's expectations during holidays can feel overwhelming. Whose expectations were you concerned about managing? Everyone's. Making sure everyone felt included and happy, and that the day went smoothly. When someone excludes people to avoid managing their expectation, they often discover that exclusion creates more management challenges than inclusion. And you thought excluding me would reduce your management responsibilities? I thought having fewer people would mean fewer complicated dynamics to navigate. How are your dynamics working out now? The silence was profound, and I could almost hear Ashley processing the reality that excluding me had created more complicated dynamics than including me ever had. Management strategies that prioritize control often create more problems than they solve, especially when they affect people who weren't actually creating problems. Margaret, what would it take for you to reconsider the cruise and spend Christmas with us? Ashley, what would it take for you to have Christmas celebration that genuinely includes me rather than Christmas celebration that includes me because you need my financial support? I do genuinely want you there. Since when? Since Thanksgiving when you excluded me? Or since December when you realized I wouldn't be funding piano lessons while being excluded from family celebrations? Timing often reveals motivation more accurately than stated intention, especially when someone's preferences change after discovering practical consequence. Since I realized that excluding you was a mistake. What kind of mistake? A financial mistake? Or a family mistake? Both. It was both kinds of mistake. When someone admits that their decision was both financially and emotionally problematic, they're usually being more honest about their motivations than they intended. Ashley, I appreciate the recognition that excluding me was a mistake, but my cruise is booked, paid for, and represents exactly the kind of Christmas I want to have this year. Please, Margaret, can't we work something out? So why did Ashley's pleading sound less like family reconciliation and more like negotiation with someone whose resources she needed more than she'd realized when she decided I wasn't suitable for her Christmas celebration? December 15th found me in the travel section of Barnes& Noble, reading cruise guides and Caribbean travel books, not because I needed information about my upcoming trip, but because the anticipation of independence felt more exciting than any Christmas morning I'd experienced in recent years. Sometimes the most liberating realization is that you don't need other people's approval to create experiences that make you happy. For 35 years as a nurse, I'd structured my holidays around other people's needs, working Christmas shifts so colleagues with young children could be home, hosting family dinners during my vacation days, organizing celebrations that served everyone else's preferences while treating my own desires as secondary considerations. Careers in caretaking often train you to prioritize other people's comfort over your own preferences, which can make personal independence feel unfamiliar, even when it becomes available. Now, reading about shore excursions and shipboard activities, I was discovering what my own holiday preferences actually were when they didn't need to accommodate Ashley's vision of perfect family photography or David's conflict avoidance strategies. I wanted Christmas breakfast that someone else prepared. I wanted holiday music that didn't require me to play piano while everyone else relaxed. I wanted celebration that included other adults who were there by choice rather than obligation. Freedom to choose your own celebration often reveals preferences you didn't realize you had because you'd never been asked what you actually wanted. My phone rang with Ashley's contact information, the fourth call from David's family since our conversation about financial support and Christmas inclusion. Margaret, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I want to apologize. Ashley's voice carried a different quality than her previous calls, less management, more genuine discomfort with the situation she'd created. Apologies often sound different when someone has had time to process consequences rather than just respond to immediate challenges. What are you apologizing for, specifically? For excluding you from Christmas, for not thinking through how that would affect you or the children, for taking your financial support for granted while not including you in family celebrations. Specificity in apologies often indicates genuine recognition of impact rather than general desire to resolve conflict. Thank you for acknowledging those things. It means something to hear them named directly. Margaret, is there anything I can do to repair this situation? What kind of repair are you thinking about? I don't know. Something that shows you how sorry I am and how much we want you to be part of our family celebrations. When someone asks for ways to repair relationships without specifying what they're willing to change, they're often hoping for solutions that don't require them to modify their behavior. Ashley, what would show me that you want me to be part of family celebrations? Including you in Christmas? Including me in Christmas planning. Asking about my preferences for holiday activities. Considering what would make me feel welcome rather than what would make you feel comfortable. The difference between including someone and accommodating someone often comes down to whose preferences drive the planning process. I should have asked what you wanted for Christmas instead of just announcing what I wanted. That would have been a different conversation, yes. What do you want for Christmas, Margaret? If you weren't taking a cruise, what would you want Christmas to look like? Questions about preferences asked after alternative plans have been made often reveal how different the original conversation could have been. I want Christmas morning with Emma and Lucas, watching them open presents, making breakfast together, playing games and music, creating memories that aren't primarily focused on photography for social media. That sounds that sounds like exactly what we could have done. It is exactly what we could have done if you'd asked what I wanted instead of announcing what you didn't want. Recognition of missed opportunities often arrives after those opportunities have been replaced by consequences. Margaret, what if I promised that Christmas would be exactly what you described? Would you consider canceling the cruise? The question revealed how much Ashley's understanding of the situation had shifted since November, but it also revealed that she was still thinking about solutions in terms of what I could do differently rather than what she needed to learn about family relationships. When someone offers to give you what you wanted after you've created better alternatives, the offer often arrives too late to compete with the independence you've discovered. Ashley, I appreciate that offer, but my cruise isn't a punishment for you or a negotiation tactic. It's a positive choice about how I want to spend Christmas this year. But wouldn't Christmas with family be better than Christmas with strangers? Christmas with people who welcome me is better than Christmas with people who include me reluctantly because they need my financial support. Inclusion offered grudgingly often feels less appealing than independence chosen enthusiastically. That's not why I'm offering to include you. Ashley, what changed between November when you excluded me and December when you started offering to include me? I realized I made a mistake. What helped you realize that? The pause was long enough for me to understand that Ashley was processing connections she hadn't examined before. Self-awareness often requires acknowledging motivations that sound less flattering than the intentions we prefer to claim. When David and I calculated holiday expenses without your financial contributions, I realized how much we'd been depending on your generosity. So the mistake was excluding someone whose money you needed, not excluding someone whose presence you valued. That's not, that's not fair. Ashley, I'm not trying to be unfair. I'm trying to understand whether you want me at Christmas because you enjoy my company or because you need my financial support. Honest questions about motivation often feel unfair to people who haven't examined their own motivations clearly. I want you there because you're David's mother and the children's grandmother. Those are roles, not reasons. What do you enjoy about my presence during family celebrations? The question had apparently never occurred to Ashley, which was illuminating about how she'd been thinking about my participation in family activities. When someone can't articulate what they enjoy about your presence, they've usually been thinking about your participation in terms of obligation rather than affection. I, you're good with the children. They love spending time with you. What else? You help with cooking and cleaning. What else do you value about my presence during family celebrations? Another long pause, during which I realized that Ashley had been thinking about me as a service provider for child entertainment and household labor, rather than as a family member whose company was inherently valuable. When someone struggles to identify what they value about your presence beyond your usefulness, they've usually been taking your participation for granted. Margaret, I honestly hadn't thought about Christmas in terms of what I enjoy about different people's presence. How had you been thinking about Christmas? In terms of what would create the most beautiful, peaceful celebration. So, why did Ashley's admission that she'd been planning Christmas around appearances rather than relationships feel like the most honest thing she'd said since Thanksgiving? Margaret, can I ask you something that might be uncomfortable? Ashley's call came on December 20th, 3 days before my cruise departure, and her voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. Of course. Do you think I'm a bad person for the way I handled Christmas planning? When someone asks whether they're a bad person for their behavior, they're usually processing shame about choices they're beginning to understand differently. I don't think you're a bad person, Ashley. I think you made decisions about Christmas that prioritized your comfort over family relationships, and I think you're learning about the consequences of those priorities. I keep thinking about what Emma said at Thanksgiving, about how you make the best Christmas cookie and let them help wrap presents without getting mad when they mess up the paper. What about that? I do get mad when they mess up the wrapping paper. I get stressed when the kitchen isn't perfectly clean while I'm baking. I want Christmas to look perfect more than I want it to feel joyful. Self-awareness that acknowledges problematic patterns often creates space for different choices, though change requires more than recognition. Why do you think looking perfect feels more important than feeling joyful? Because when things look perfect, other people think I'm a good mother and wife. When things feel joyful but look messy, I worry that people think I'm not managing my family properly. Social media culture often rewards performance of happiness over authentic experience of happiness, especially for women managing family activities. Ashley, who are you performing for? Whose approval are you seeking through perfect Christmas appearance? Everyone's, my mother's, my friends, people who see our family photos and social media posts. What about your own approval? What about David's and Emma's and Lucas's actual happiness? When external validation becomes the primary goal, internal satisfaction and authentic relationships often become secondary consideration. I think I've been so focused on what Christmas should look like that I forgot to think about what Christmas should feel like. What do you want Christmas to feel like? Relax, happy, like everyone wants to be there instead of like everyone's performing for photograph. Recognition of the difference between performance and authenticity often requires examining which activities serve genuine connection versus social presentation. Ashley, what would Christmas look like if you planned it around authentic enjoyment rather than photographic perfection? Messier, louder, more spontaneous, probably more fun. And you would be comfortable with messier and louder? I want to be comfortable with messier and louder. I want Emma and Lucas to remember Christmas as fun rather than stressful. Desire to change often precedes ability to change, but acknowledging the desire creates foundation for developing different habits. What would help you feel more comfortable with authentic celebration rather than perfect presentation? Practice, probably, and maybe less social media documentation of everything we do. What else? Having people there who enjoy messy, authentic celebration instead of people who expect perfect presentation. Family dynamics often improve when the participants prioritize genuine connection over social expectation. Margaret, you've always seemed comfortable with authentic celebration, with letting the children be children instead of managing them for appearances. 35 years in intensive care teaches you that authentic moments matter more than perfect presentation. Life is unpredictable, relationships are precious, and controlling appearances often requires sacrificing genuine connection. Professional experience with mortality often creates perspective about what matters most in family relationships. I've been treating Christmas like a performance instead of like a celebration. What would it take to treat Christmas like a celebration? Including people who contribute to joy rather than excluding people who might disrupt perfection. Recognition of how exclusion serves appearance rather than happiness often leads to different priorities about inclusion. Ashley, what are you learning about family relationships through this situation? That excluding people to create perfect occasions often creates imperfect relationships. That financial support and emotional support are connected in ways I didn't realize. that my children prefer authentic fun to managed perfection. Learning that encompasses both practical and emotional insight often indicates genuine growth rather than just conflict resolution. What else? That independence can look more appealing than inclusion when inclusion comes with conditions about how someone should behave or contribute. What do you mean? You choosing a cruise over Christmas with us made our Christmas look less attractive than your alternative. That was uncomfortable because it meant our family celebration wasn't as appealing as we thought it was. When someone's independence highlights the limitations of your alternatives, it often creates motivation to make your alternatives more genuinely attractive. Ashley, what kind of family celebration would be more appealing than independent alternative? Celebration where everyone feels genuinely welcome, where people participate because they want to be there, not because they feel obligated, where the goal is authentic enjoyment rather than perfect presentation. Understanding what makes family gatherings genuinely attractive often requires examining what makes them unattractive. That sounds like the kind of Christmas that would be hard to walk away from. It does. And I think I understand now why you found it easy to walk away from the Christmas I was planning. Recognition that someone's withdrawal reflects the quality of what was being offered often creates motivation to offer something different. Margaret, I know your cruise is tomorrow, and I know it's too late to change Christmas plans for this year, but I want you to know that I understand now why you made the choice you made. Thank you for understanding. And Ashley? Yes? I hope your Christmas morning is everything you want it to be. Authentic and joyful, and memorable for all the right reasons. I hope your cruise is amazing. I hope you have the most wonderful Christmas, and I hope you post pictures that make all of us jealous of how much fun you're having. Genuine wishes for someone else's happiness often indicate resolution of competitive dynamics that we're serving no one well. Ashley, what would you like Christmas to look like next year? Like a celebration where everyone feels welcome, where the goal is connection rather than perfection, and where people want to be there because it's authentic fun rather than social obligation. That sounds like exactly the kind of Christmas I would love to be part of. Plans for future celebrations based on lessons learned often create more hope than apologies for past decisions. Really, really. And Ashley? Emma's piano lessons and Lucas's soccer fees will continue regardless of holiday arrangement. Family support shouldn't be conditional on family inclusion, and family inclusion shouldn't be conditional on financial contribution. So why did Ashley's genuine recognition of what went wrong feel like the foundation for building something much better than what we'd lost? Christmas Day, Caribbean Sea. The view from my balcony stateroom was everything the cruise brochures had promised. Endless blue water, perfect weather, and the particular peace that comes from being exactly where you choose to be, rather than where obligation suggests you should be. Freedom chosen deliberately often feels different from freedom that results from exclusion, even when the external circumstances look similar. I'd woken up to room service coffee and pastries, spent the morning at the ship's Christmas brunch with other travelers who'd chosen independence over complicated family dynamics, and was now preparing to video call Emma and Lucas during their Christmas afternoon while their parents managed post-gift cleanup. Modern technology makes it possible to maintain authentic relationships with people you love while avoiding difficult dynamics with people who make those relationships complicated. The ship's internet connection was excellent, and the FaceTime call connected immediately to reveal Emma and Lucas in Christmas pajamas, surrounded by wrapping paper debris and new toys, their faces bright with genuine excitement rather than the managed smiles Ashley usually choreographed for family photos. Grandma Margaret, are you really on a ship right now? Emma's voice carried pure delight rather than confusion about why I wasn't there in person. I am. Look at this view. I turned my phone to show them the ocean horizon, then back to my face. How was Christmas morning? It was really fun. Mom let us open presents without worrying about keeping the wrapping paper neat, and Dad made funny voices when we read the cards. Children often report most enthusiastically about experiences that feel authentic rather than managed. That sounds perfect. What was your favorite part? Mom played Christmas music and we all sang together, even when we didn't know all the words. It was silly and loud and really fun. Lucas leaned into the frame, chocolate still visible on his face from morning candy. And we made pancakes that looked like snowmen. They were lopsided, but they tasted good. Authentic family moments often sound messier and more joyful than perfectly orchestrated family activities. That sounds like exactly the kind of Christmas morning I hoped you would have. Grandma Margaret, what did you do for Christmas? I had brunch with new friends from the ship, and then we watched Christmas movies by the pool, and tonight there's a special Christmas dinner with dancing after. That sounds amazing. Are you having fun without us? Children often ask direct questions that adults would consider tactless, but that actually reveal important information about relationships. I'm having wonderful Christmas experiences and I'm missing you at the same time. Both things can be true. We're missing you too, but we're also excited that you're having an adventure. Healthy relationships often allow for multiple feelings simultaneously rather than requiring people to choose between happiness and missing each other. David appeared in the background of the call, and I could see Ashley moving around their living room, cleaning up Christmas debris with the relaxed efficiency of someone who wasn't stressed about maintaining perfect presentation throughout the process. Mom, how's the cruise? Are you enjoying yourself? I'm having the most wonderful Christmas, David. The ship is beautiful, the other passengers are friendly, and I'm discovering that independence can be just as joyful as family celebration. I'm glad. We were worried that you might be lonely. I'm not lonely at all. I'm having exactly the kind of Christmas I wanted to have. Loneliness and independence are different experiences, though people often confuse them when someone chooses autonomy over inclusion. Ashley appeared in the video frame, looking relaxed in ways I hadn't seen during previous holiday celebrations. Her hair was slightly messy, her clothes were comfortable rather than photogenic, and her expression carried genuine peace rather than managed pleasantness. Margaret, you look radiant. The Caribbean obviously agrees with you. The Caribbean is lovely, but I think what agrees with me is having Christmas exactly the way I wanted to have it. I can see that, and our Christmas morning was exactly the way I wanted it too. Relaxed and genuine and focused on actual enjoyment rather than perfect presentation. When people create celebrations that align with their authentic preferences rather than their social expectations, the results often benefit everyone involved. Ashley, how do you feel about the way Christmas morning went? Like this is what Christmas should always feel like. The children were relaxed, David was playful. I wasn't stressed about managing anyone's behavior for photographs. It felt like authentic celebration. What made the difference? Letting go of expectations about how things should look and focusing on how we wanted things to feel. Authenticity often requires releasing control over outcomes in favor of presence during experience. That sounds like exactly the kind of Christmas that would be appealing to be part of. Margaret, would you like to plan next year's Christmas with us? From the beginning this time, with everyone's preferences included in the conversation? Invitations that include planning participation often signal genuine inclusion rather than accommodation. I would love that. What kind of planning are you thinking about? Starting in July or August, talking about what everyone wants Christmas to feel like, and then creating celebration that serves those feelings rather than external expectations. That sounds like the best possible way to approach family celebration. Collaborative planning often creates more satisfying outcomes than individual control, especially when the collaboration begins early enough to accommodate everyone's actual preferences. Mom, what are your plans for the rest of your cruise? David asked. Shore excursion tomorrow in Cozumel, New Year's Eve celebration on the ship, and then home to start planning my next adventure. Next adventure? I'm thinking about a spring trip to Europe, maybe summer in Alaska. Retirement is turning out to be more exciting than I expected. Independence often reveals preferences and possibilities that weren't apparent when choices were constrained by other people's expectations. That sounds amazing. And Margaret? Ashley's voice carried genuine warmth. Thank you for showing us what it looks like to choose joy over accommodation. It was exactly the lesson our family needed. Thank you for learning from the situation instead of just being upset about it. That takes wisdom and courage. Growth often requires acknowledging mistakes without becoming defensive about the learning process. Emma, Lucas, what do you want to tell Grandma Margaret about next Christmas? That we want you there, they said in unison, and that we want to help plan it so it's fun for everyone, Emma added, and that we want to make snowman pancakes with you, Lucas contributed. Children often express the clearest priorities about family relationships and celebration planning. That sounds like exactly the kind of Christmas I would love to be part of. I'll see you all when I get back. and we'll start planning the most wonderful Christmas ever. So, why did ending this call feel like the beginning of something much better than what we'd lost? A family celebration based on authentic inclusion rather than conditional accommodation. 6 months later, the photo album from my Christmas cruise sat on my coffee table, filled with pictures that captured exactly the kind of holiday I'd created for myself. Sunset dinners with new friends, shore excursions to Mayan ruins, New Year's Eve dancing under Caribbean stars, and my own radiant smile in every single image. Documentation of genuine happiness often looks different from documentation of performed happiness, even when the activities appear similar. Ashley had been right that posting cruise photos would make the family jealous, but not for the reasons she'd expected. The photos didn't make them jealous of my luxury vacation. They made them curious about the authentic joy visible in my face, the kind of unguarded happiness that comes from choosing experiences based on personal preference rather than social obligation. Margaret, I keep looking at your cruise photos and thinking about how genuinely happy you look in all of them, Ashley had said during one of our regular coffee meetings that had begun shortly after my return. Not performing happiness, but actually experiencing it. Authentic joy often inspires questions about how to create similar experience rather than resentment about someone else's choices. What do you think made the difference? I think you were having experiences you actually wanted to have with people who welcomed your participation, rather than managing experiences to meet other people's expectations. What does that teach you about family celebration? That welcome and accommodation are different things. That genuine inclusion creates different experiences than grudging inclusion. Learning often arrives through contrasts that highlight differences between approaches that seem similar but create different outcomes. Our family's approach to holiday planning had changed fundamentally since the Christmas cruise incident. We now started holiday conversations in August, asking everyone what they hoped celebration would feel like, rather than announcing what it should look like. Emma and Lucas participated in planning discussions as full family members rather than recipients of adult decisions. Collaborative planning often creates more satisfying outcomes than benevolent control, especially when the collaboration includes people whose preferences have been overlooked. Grandma Margaret, what do you want Christmas morning to feel like this year? Emma had asked during our first family planning meeting in July. I want it to feel relaxed and joyful, with time for genuine conversation and activities that bring us together, rather than activities that create beautiful photos. I want to make cookies with you and not worry about whether the kitchen stays perfectly clean, Lucas had added. Children often express the most honest preferences about family activities because they focus on actual enjoyment rather than appearance management. Ashley had been learning to separate social media documentation from family experience, posting fewer photos, but capturing more authentic moments. Her Instagram account now showed messier but happier family activities, and the response from her followers had been overwhelmingly positive. People comment that our family looks genuinely happy now instead of perfectly posed, she'd told me recently. It turns out that authenticity is more appealing than perfection, even on social media. Authentic presentation often receives better response than performed presentation, even in contexts that seem to reward performance. David had been practicing direct communication about family decisions instead of diplomatic avoidance of conflict. The change had improved his relationships with both Ashley and me, demonstrating that clarity often creates less stress than accommodation. I've learned that avoiding difficult conversations doesn't prevent conflict. It just delays conflict while making it more complicated, he'd reflected during one of our monthly dinners. Conflict avoidance often creates more relationship problems than direct communication, even when direct communication feels uncomfortable initially. The most significant change had been in my own relationship with independence and family connection. The cruise had taught me that choosing autonomy over accommodation didn't mean choosing isolation over relationship. It meant creating space for authentic connection by refusing to accept conditional inclusion. True family relationships often become stronger when they're based on genuine choice rather than obligation, even when establishing choice requires temporary separation. My second adventure, a spring trip to Italy, had been planned with the same principle, choosing experiences based on personal preference rather rather than family expectation. Ashley and David had been supportive and curious rather than worried or offended, demonstrating how much our family dynamic had shifted toward respecting individual choice. When family members learn to support each other's independence, the relationships often become more genuine and more satisfying for everyone involved. "Mom, you've become an inspiration for authentic living," David had said when I showed them photos from my Italian adventure. "Watching you choose joy over accommodation has changed how Ashley and I think about our own choices." Personal authenticity often gives other people permission to examine their own compromises and make different choices. Emma and Lucas had begun expressing their own preferences more directly, asking for family activities they actually enjoyed, rather than accepting adult decisions about what would be good for them. Their comfort with direct communication had surprised everyone with how much they'd been accommodating without expressing their actual desires. Children often model healthy communication more effectively than adults because they haven't yet learned to prioritize other people's comfort over their own authentic expression. "Grandma, Margaret, thank you for teaching us that family members can love each other and still choose different things sometimes," Emma had said during our Christmas planning meeting. "What do you mean?" "That you can love us and still choose to go on a cruise if we're not including you nicely, and that we can love you and still want different kinds of Christmas activities sometimes." Children often articulate relationship wisdom more clearly than adults because they understand that love and autonomy can coexist. The financial aspects of our family relationships had also changed. I'd continued supporting Emma's piano lessons and Lucas's soccer fees, but Ashley and David had begun contributing to these expenses as well, treating my support as generous addition rather than necessary foundation for the children's activities. Financial support that's acknowledged and appreciated often feels different from financial support that's expected and taken for granted. "We don't want your generosity to be the reason you can participate in family activities," Ashley had. "We want your participation to be welcome, regardless of financial contribution." Healthy family relationships separate emotional inclusion from financial support, allowing both to exist without creating transactional dynamics. As I looked through my cruise photo album and planned my next adventure, a summer trip to Alaska with 2 other retired nurses who'd been inspired by my Christmas independence, I realized that the most valuable lesson hadn't been about standing up for myself or setting boundaries with difficult family members. The most profound learning often involves discovering possibilities we didn't know existed, rather than solving problems we thought we had to accept. The lesson had been about authenticity, that genuine relationships require space for genuine choice, that authentic celebration happens when people participate by preference rather than obligation, and that independence and connection aren't opposite, they're requirements for each other. When people are free to choose their level of participation, their participation often becomes more meaningful than when participation is expected or demanded. "Margaret, what would you tell other people who feel excluded from family celebrations but don't know how to respond?" Ashley had asked recently. "I'd tell them that creating better alternatives often teaches families more about inclusion than accepting exclusion gracefully. That independence chosen enthusiastically can look more appealing than accommodation accepted reluctantly. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for difficult family relationships is demonstrate what authentic joy looks like when it's chosen freely, and that authentic relationships can handle authentic choices, even when those choices create temporary distance that leads to permanent respect." So why did planning my Alaska adventure feel like the natural next step in family relationships? That had become more genuine through learning to honor both independence and connection.